open for three. Dagger!
Welcome back to Well Beyond the Arc. I'm Jay filling in for Manoli, and we have Montana here with me. In Montana, we have some new NBA champs.
We do, man. We knew it was coming. I think we both called it pretty much the whole time. We knew what this series was going to be. I think we both knew who was going to come out on top, but they took care of business pretty swiftly.
I'm not going to lie. I almost went and called it for a sweep, but I didn't have the balls like a lot of other people. So I went Nuggets in 5, ended up looking like Nostradamus.
No, yeah. I mean, hey, we knew it was coming because the Heat team just did not show up at any point really during the series. They had that one game, but even during that game, they didn't look like that dangerous Heat team they did the whole other rest of the playoffs, in my opinion.
No, for that one win, they needed their guys to ball out and the Nuggets to not play their best.
Yep. Nope, that's the truth right there for sure. I agree with you on that.
All right, I see you. We're here. Smoke already. Like, you guys coming or what? We're waiting.
No, man. About time. There we go.
So, what impressed you most about the Nuggets? Because I want to ask that because it's easy to watch all this stuff after the fact, and they didn't get a lot of primetime games, and a lot of people didn't realize how good this team was. And for me, it's Jamal Murray coming back from that injury and playing, I think, better than he did before it.
I would say for sure that was the factor because Jokic has been this pretty consistent player the last couple of seasons. The factor has been Murray's health. So having Murray back and healthy, this is arguably the healthiest he's been since the bubble. So seeing him that healthy, that's just who he is. People were debating, was he just great in the bubble? No, he was just healthy in the bubble. This is the same player that we saw there. And like you said, yeah, Jokic played great. I will say that in my personal opinion, Jokic definitely elevated his game this season to a level where I don't think it's been consistently with all of his stats. But the player that made the biggest difference in the playoffs and the finals was Murray. The teams could not stop Murray from scoring. Malone said once he scores one, that hoop becomes like a hula hoop to him and he can just keep making them. And that is true. Once he makes one, he heats up. And that happened throughout all the playoffs, but especially during the Heat, especially in the last game.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a great mix of young players with really good veterans on that team too, because I didn't realize that until this run, but I didn't realize KCP's a 10-year vet.
Oh yeah, he's been around. He's had several different stops. The only people forget that because I think a lot of people didn't even really realize he was in the league until he was a Laker. That's really when people paid attention and started to take notice. So it'd be easy to think that he came to the league as a Laker and was a Laker and then from there on, but no, he was a vet. He's been around. So KCP is a vet. Let's talk about another vet, DeAndre Jordan. You know what? Here's the thing. He's been around the league. Did he have the biggest, part on this team? No, but just having that, him and Jokic have such a good relationship, and you have to assume that Jokic growing as a leader and as a player, I bet DeAndre Jordan has a role in that, especially in the locker room, being around the league, being in the playoffs all those years, Lob City. DeAndre Jordan knows what it means to have that spotlight on you. So I feel like that's a big piece that we don't look at that closely.
I forget his name because I'm an asshole, but the coach for the Nuggets.
Mike Malone?
Yeah, he was on Pat McAfee today talking about how big of a role that the vets like Jordan played and how they were coaches. And you saw that, you saw it during the games where you would have the vets come off and talk to these young players on the side. They did a great one in, I don't know, was it game 3, game 4, where they showed the vets pulling players off to the side and actually let you listen to the conversation, telling them where to cut, when to cut. I just don't remember who they do it to because when it starts to break to commercials, when I break out the living room.
No, that's fair. I feel you on that. I'm with you on that one, man. I don't pay too close attention to that. But no, and that is true. That the vets would make that team. And when we talk about the great teams in NBA history, most of those teams are made up of a couple of vets. And this team had really great depth. This team, top to bottom, by far was the best team in the NBA from the regular season to the playoffs because of who they were in their team. Also, shout out to Ish Smith. That man has been running around the league. He's been to so many different stops, and he's finally got himself a ring too. So you get a player like Ish Smith a ring. Also, shout out to Thomas Bryant. He left the Lakers for more playing time and then never left the bench, but he still has a ring, and the Lakers can't say the same. So shout out to Thomas Bryant.
Is that the kid who went from winning 3 high school championships to a college national championship to an NBA title?
No, Thomas Bryant is the player that was a Laker. He was the center from the Lakers that wanted to trade. That is, what is his name? I'm gonna look.
That's a hell of a role.
Oh, is it Strus? Is it Strus or is that no? That's a Heat player, I think. I'm gonna look it up.
It's that kid who had that big game at the end when they were
Christian Braun. There we go, Christian Braun.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, one with Kansas, one in high. Yeah, that kid's a baller. And
3 in high school, 1 with Kansas, and now a fucking that. That overpay that kid because that's some lucky kid right there.
That's the same type of thing Magic Johnson did. That's how he entered the league. He won all through that. So I mean, that's a great way to start your career. And honestly, I can see him remaining a Nugget, and I can see the Nuggets keeping this up potentially because this team won this series and won these playoffs like a dynasty type of team, like a start of a dynasty. That's how it kind of looks to me a little bit.
I was going to ask you that because they're a young fucking team with a lot of talent. They never seem to let the moment get too big for them. And when it was time to just get it back together, go home, win this thing on your home court, they just did it, and they owned that game from start to finish. Like, I know people were like, oh, the Heat let them back in. Like, dude, it wasn't that big of a lead at half. It was like, you know what I mean? Everybody was like, oh, they let them back in online. I'm like, nah, the Nuggets, man, they were playing from the beginning of that game with a real mindset of like, we're finishing it here. And I even said it to Manoli after the game. As cool as a sweep would be, right? I didn't say that part, but as cool as a sweep would be, it is better to win it for the fans and the team on your home court.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm with you on that for sure. And that meant a lot to Denver. I mean, obviously, they are a city that has had some success and they've had some great teams in several different sports. So I think that was a great thing for that city. And I'm not a Nuggets fan. And honestly, I almost didn't want them to win because they beat my Lakers. But I will say at the end of the day, it is cool to see a smaller market team like that, a team that's not maybe as, they're a great team. They have history, but they're probably not looked at as one of those top tier NBA teams. It's cool to see a team like that win. And what I will say is this, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because some of the dynasties like the Warriors, they had some success, 70s, 80s, a little bit in the 90s, a little bit in the 2000s, but they weren't really known as a dynasty team until they got Steph, Clay, and that team started. They were not looked at as a team. Even after they won their first championship, I don't think people expected them to keep that up, and they kept building on that. This Nuggets team is starting the same way. They're not a Lakers team that has all the expectations that are always there. They're taking those expectations. They won one championship, and now I can see them building on that because the way that those dynasties start is usually from the teams you don't expect. And so I think this Nuggets team is sneakily getting in that area and getting that start to that because that's what this looks like to me.
I like how you brought up the Warriors, though, because the Warriors and the Nuggets won it the same way, team basketball.
Yo, 100%. That's how you start dynasties too. That's how you see these dynasties start. When we look at the Chicago Bulls, yeah, you think of Michael Jordan, he was great, but that was team basketball. They moved. I mean, that's some of the best NBA teams of all time were those Bulls teams, and it was more than just Jordan. Same with the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq. They had Robert Horry. They had pieces. Derek Fisher. They had pieces. These great dynasties have pieces that play team basketball. It's not focused around one or two players. And that's why this Nuggets team is so great. And that's why if this Nuggets team does this offseason correctly, which I think they will, I think this is the team that has the best chance of running it back that we've seen in the last few, because no team has ran it back since the Warriors ran it back. I think this Nuggets team has the best chance of doing it from all the teams we've seen in the last 6 years.
And it's got to be nice for the NBA to see somebody from the West win it who's not from Texas or California.
Oh my gosh, breath of fresh air, because that's always who you see it when we see it in the West, which is usually the West. That's who we see it from. So yeah, shout out to someone not winning it from there. I guess that's a good point.
And I don't remember how many years. What was that?
Denver needs it because their Broncos are going to be a dumpster fire this year, and their hockey team didn't have a great finish. So Denver needs something like this.
That's a different conversation for a different podcast, but I have a feeling that the Denver Broncos are going to shock some people with Sean Payton there. But so do you think they got the right MVP of the finals? Who would you have gave it to? What do you think of that?
I think they did. I think they did because a lot of times you see, in my personal opinion, you see them give the NBA Finals award not just to the. I mean, you see it. I don't know. It's usually looking aside from every other series, you look just at the finals. But we also a common theme. We see the team's star player win it, even if they're not the ones that maybe should have won it. We've seen that happen before. But in the same breath, we've seen players that maybe you didn't expect win it. And so we've seen it go both ways. I think they got it right. I have no issues with it because this is the guy that this team is built around. This is the guy that has gotten them there. So in my opinion, they got that right.
I agree. And I've seen some other people putting out names and I don't have a problem with the people thinking that Gordon could have been in the mix because he played some hellacious defense, huge points when they needed it. I get that. I heard Jamal's name in there. But I will say that Jokic played great defense, distributed the ball. He had a 40-point game. It's just Jokic did it all. And this is going to sound crazy, but he reminds me a lot of Tim Duncan.
That's a great, because Tim Duncan wasn't flashy. Tim Duncan didn't have the high fly. Tim Duncan wasn't looked at. He was he dominated, but he wasn't looked at as a Shaq, a dominating in your face that much dominance. It wasn't so much the physical as what he could do with the ball, what he could do. Yeah, that's a great comparison. I think that's a super accurate comparison right there. And I think that is why the Nuggets team is so great, because you're not looking at a player that is focused on all the highlight, the big dunks. He's moving the ball around. The team that moves the ball around the best is usually going to be the team that wins the game. Even when we talk about the Warriors back when they were dominant with Kevin Durant, the way they moved the ball was amazing. It wasn't just Kevin Durant scoring 50 points a game. They were moving the ball. Everyone was getting touches, and it was ridiculous. This Nuggets team reminded me of that, and Jokic is a big driving factor. If you take Jokic out, I don't think we see that ball moved like that, even between players that aren't him and other players. When other players are moving the ball, if Jokic is there, it's better. So Jokic deserved it because of what he did throughout the entire series. Gordon played great, but Gordon was kind of inconsistent. Gordon's great, but he didn't play as consistent basketball as Jokic did.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was that game 1 or 2 where he just took over the first quarter and put up 14 and D'd everybody up. And I think a lot of that came from that one game where he showed his ass in the beginning. But I like that they weren't afraid to look at Gordon and be like, dude, just get on Jimmy or get on whoever, you know what I mean? And let him D up. And so right now to you, is the Joker the best player on the planet?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I mean, he's definitely the best big man in the league. That's by far. There's no question. Matter of fact, when we talk big man,
I'm a Bucks fan, and I'm starting to go, he might be better than Giannis. And that's a lot. I am the most homer-ass sports fan in the world, and I'm like, yeah, he might be better than Giannis.
See, that's really interesting because the thing is, when you look at their accolades, they're decently similar accolades-wise. They're not super, they both have that chip. They both have the MVP. It's just, I think that like when we look at accolades, they're very similar, but when we look at their play style, they couldn't be any different. So the only reason it's hard for me to even compare them is because of that. But comparing them, because I said he's the best in the league, the reason I'm saying that is because I think what Jokic offers is a consistent game that even if he doesn't put up 40 points, if he dishes 10 plus assists, they're probably winning the ball game.
They are.
Johnny's kid doesn't have the same skill set that consistently.
They were 0-3 in the playoffs when Jokic scored 40 or more.
Well, see, so that just goes to show that the other things that he does is what sharpens his game and makes his game better. So Giannis has those other aspects, but it's not quite the same consistency as Jokic. So I have Jokic above him. But I've got Jokic, if I'm being completely honest, I've got Jokic sitting pretty comfortably in my top 5 all time for big men. He's not high on my list, but he's definitely in my list. He's probably my 5th spot at this moment as we speak for my top 5.
I honestly think if he keeps playing the way he is, that he'll be in that conversation at the end of the day of was he the greatest? Was he one of the greatest? Like I said, the Tim Duncan comparison, what I thought was why it brought me to that is I just kept remembering back to when Shaq named Tim Duncan the big fundamental. And everything I watched about Jokic is just fundamentally sound. He's not the most athletic. He's not the fastest guy. He's not going to jump out of the gym, but he does everything right. And that is very impressive at a guy who's, I don't know, I think they list him at 6'11". He's probably 6'9", but whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing about Jokic. Like you said, he is a very fundamentally sound player. His fundamentals, that's what makes him great. It's not that he's an extremely flashy player, an extremely dominant player. That's just not him. He is just an extremely consistent player who can do so many different things on the basketball court that usually the different things that he's doing are helping his team win games, whether they're close games, whether they're winning in a blowout. It doesn't matter. His skill set is what is fueling that. So he's my 5th because look, I mean, when we look at his MVPs, 2 MVPs, we look at his championship, we look at his all-star appearances, we look at the numbers he produces. He is the best passing big man of all time. Well, if we're going to say he's the best passing big man of all time, that's already an accolade that puts him up there in the top 10 for me. If you're going to call someone the best at a skill set like that, that puts them up there. That right there boosts him. But now he has the chip, the finals. I mean, he has all of these things. So he's my 5th best center of all time. And if this Nuggets dynasty actually turns into a dynasty, he could be in the top 3 when it's all said and done for me.
Yeah, I just like that series. I think I said this earlier, but I really mean it. Like I can't bring this enough. I think that series brought eyes to Denver from fans who didn't have a clue on how good that team was. And I think we're finally going to start seeing more of them next year, which I think is great for the league to see more of Jokic and this team play in more primetime games and better spots. Because if you weren't like up in the mountain time, you weren't catching a fucking Nuggets game.
No, for sure you were not. That's the truth. And also, while there are a lot of marquee matchups the Nuggets have, there's a lot of nights where there's a matchup that most people would watch over it. So it's also, even if they are on, and even if people, it's just, they're a smaller market team. They've got great players, Carmelo Anthony. You could even throw Allen Iverson. He had that stint there. Obviously, Mutombo. They have great players. They've had some fantastic teams. But when we think about the Nuggets, this is the team we will think about first. This is by far the best Nuggets team of all time. And I'm going to be honest, this is one of the better teams that we have seen in the last 20 years. If we're talking, fantasy matchups, I'm putting this team up against a lot of former championship teams, and I'm giving them a pretty good chance of winning. This is a super solid team, and I think this Nuggets team is the team to beat. I'm really excited because this Nuggets team, it's not the Warriors, it's not the Lakers, it's not the Mavs, it's not the Suns. The Nuggets are the team in the West to beat. So now all the teams I mentioned have to try to beat them and regain the West, and I think that's exciting. I think we're going to see some great matchups this next season because of the Nuggets and who they are now.
Yeah, and I did hear today again on Pat McAfee, the team was saying part of what really got under their skin and motivated them is even after they slapped the shit out of your Lakers, sent them home in a sweep, the whole fucking thing was still about the Lakers. Or they were like, they beat them in game one, and the headlines are the Lakers figure out the Nuggets. They're like, we couldn't get any love even
No,
after beating the Lakers.
there was none. No, I'll admit it. As a Lakers fan, there was none. It was all about the Lakers, and it still is about some of these other teams. You still hear people saying about even after the Nuggets, they still have in some people's eyes, this Nuggets team still has more to prove, and that's what makes me think that they're going to come back with more fire. So it's exciting. As a Lakers fan, I'm hoping this is what I think. I think we're going to see him again. I think it's going to be a rematch next season in the Western Conference Finals. I think it'll be a different series, but I hope it'll be a different series. But I wouldn't be shocked if Denver, let's talk about the Warriors for a second. The Warriors were a team that won the chip, I would say, out of nowhere. I didn't expect them to win it when they beat the Celtics. I didn't even expect them to win it before the playoffs started. I didn't think they were going to be.
Because nobody expected you could win in the NBA with guard play like you do in college, and they switched that on everybody.
Which is you're not wrong. They did. They kind of it was kind of a new. It felt like you felt like you were entering a new Warrior age. Now Draymond punching, I think Draymond punching Poole is part of the reason that didn't happen. The team chemistry, a lot of stuff went on after that championship that I think took fuel out of that engine. But what I will say is this: people were really, really, really amped to see this Golden State Warriors team, but they could not do it. They came back and they looked like a completely different team. I do not think this Nuggets team is going to do that. Whether they win it or not next season, they're going to come back the same exact team ready to go. Whether they have the same exact pieces, I'm not saying that, but they'll come back ready to run it back for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing how the big market teams get talked about even after, like we watching the Nuggets do what they did with the Lakers. They're still talking about the Lakers. The Heat beat the Bucks, and for 2 weeks it was about the Bucks, not the Heat. And don't get me wrong, I was on the opposite end of you. I did not want the Heat to win because fuck you for knocking my Bucks out. Like I said, it's the reason I hate the Eagles, because of the NFC Championship game in 2017. It's truly the reason I hate the Eagles. No other reason than the NFC Championship game in 2017. So it's just amazing how the media does that. But you and I were going to talk about something on the show about teams that may need to rebuild, retool, stay how they are. So I guess let's start with the idea of, what do the Heat do from here?
I mean, here's the deal. I think the Heat, they need to get another star. They need to get a big name player. There are players out there. Now, okay, are they going to get Dame? I don't think they're going to get Dame. I don't think Dame's going anywhere, but that's a name that's been thrown out there. Something that, Fred VanVleet's out. That's a guard. They need to get CP3. I don't know if they'll get CP3.
You're going to your Lakers.
CP3?
Yes. Yes, CP3 is going to the Lakers finally after they fucked Kobe Bryant out of winning another championship to protect Michael Jordan by nullifying that fucking trade for CP3. I'm a firm believer that David Stern nixed that fucking trade because he was protecting Michael Jordan.
You might be right. And maybe CP3 does end up a Laker. I think if not, this was one of the other spots that I could see. Kyrie Irving might end up moving, but whether it's these players or another player, there's also word that the Warriors are willing to look into trades that don't involve anyone other than Steph Curry, essentially. So whatever happens, I think that this Heat team needs to pick up a bigger name player. They need to pick up another player so that it's Bam, Jimmy, and someone else, because Bam and Jimmy, they couldn't get it done in these playoffs. And yeah, it's a great storyline. Oh, we have undrafted players. They've got to get some more talent. They've got to beef up and juice up that team, because with a third player, you know what? There was talk that there was a trade talk with Kyrie Irving before he went to the Mavs. Imagine Kyrie Irving on this Heat team. This game is going to set. This series is going to 7. This series against the Nuggets, in my opinion, if you add Kyrie, is going to 7. So think about that. I mean, just that would give them that boost. They need that boost. So if I'm thinking about the Heat, I'm thinking they need to get that third big name piece on that team, and on not the bench. They don't need to pick up a bench piece. They need a starting piece that is going to give them that boost.
Did you realize this is Pat Riley's like 19th time being to a finals as a player, coach, or a GM?
It's ridiculous. He stays almost winning. He doesn't win it every time, but at least he makes it.
I mean, fuck, you go 19 times, you're going to lose some. You know what I mean? Like, people hate on Brady for losing 3. I'm like, he went to 10. What do you want this dude to do? You can't win them all. Like, you know?
True. He won more than he lost.
Yeah, I feel like the Heat need another player also. And I don't know where you get that from. The only thing that I was thinking is, do you call up the Grizz since they're fucking just a mess and be like, hey, what do you want?
I mean, here's the thing. This is what I will say. I'm going to say, I think like another player, I don't know. I think that there's definitely pieces that are out there. Another player, James Harden. Now, does James Harden get the money he thinks he deserves from the Heat? Do the Heat pursue him? I don't know, but that came up that's a potential landing spot. But whoever it is, the Heat need that big name player. It isn't going to come from these undrafted. What they want to do, what they want to accomplish is not going to happen with a team of, 7 undrafted players or something. Like, maybe not. It wasn't 7, but it was like 3, 4. It was more than one.
I think it was 4, but yeah.
4. Regardless, that's a ridiculous. I mean, 4, and the players like Oladipo, he's out. He's done. It's time to move on from Oladipo. It might be time to move on from Kyle Lowry. You need to beef this team up, and you need to look to the future. Another player that's looking to maybe get out is Jalen Brunson. Maybe Brunson comes to Miami. That's a good mix right there. You put even just a player like Brunson on that team. So I think what the Heat need to do is get a guard. They need to get a point guard to beef that team up, to put with Jimmy, to put with Bam. And if you put a guard, even like Brunson, you put Brunson on that team, I think they make it back to the finals. If you put James Harden on that team, it depends on what Harden we see. If we see more Houston James Harden, which we saw flashes of in Philly, I think maybe they could be back in the finals. But if you see Philly James Harden, it's going to be the same story. But again, they need to get a guard. I'm saying that you need to get a guard. If they get Dame, I think they're winning the next title. I don't think they're going to get Dame, but if they get Dame, it's over.
Do you think Dame's on the move?
I don't think he is. I do think he will be on the move. I don't think he's going to finish in Portland. I do think he's eventually going to move on. And I do think that he'll still have enough in the tank to be a good part of a team when he does. I don't think he's moving yet, though.
I feel like Dame's the one guy that every time you turn on the TV and they're talking about players moving, it's him, and he never goes anywhere.
Both him and another player, Bradley Beal, because he's being talked about. The Wizards are willing to trade him, and Bradley Beal is being talked about being traded or going to another team so many times, and it's not happened. So there's a couple of players that their names are in the mix, and it's kind of like we kind of get sick of hearing about it. We want to see them just be on one team but a lot of players are on the move quite a bit, which that's the way to remember the NBA is a business, to see some of these players on the move or almost on the move. That's what reminds us that it's a business.
Well, you just jump in if you have a team you're thinking of too, but because this is something that was just said on ESPN the other day and been a big talking point, it's 50-50, so I'm going to bring up the Pelicans. Is it time to move on from Zion?
So here's the thing. I think that it is time. I think it is. I think it's time to move on. They're talking about trading him and a couple other pieces to try to get a top draft spot. And here's what I'll say about that. I kind of like that because I do think it's time to move on. I think if they can keep a player like Ingram, that's great. That's been a great highlight for their team, way more than Zion has been. They've got players that are highlight players for their team. If they can keep them, I think that would be great. But I think it's time to move on from Zion. And I think it's in all areas. For him and for them, I think it's time to move on. I think Zion could still maybe be successful, even if it's more in a role player spot, but it's not going to be there. I don't think that's going to be the place where he's successful. So I think it's time for them to move on. I don't know for sure if relying on a draft pick, especially if it's not going to be a number one, which it's absolutely not going to be a number one, the Spurs are not going to pull that trigger. So I think you risk it, you gamble. Anytime you go for a top pick, you can gamble because we've seen top name players that came out of college or came out of overseas that did not formulate. So I just think you have to be careful when you trade, star name players, star level players for those draft picks. But I think it is time for them to move on. And I do think that trading for a draft pick could be a good idea. So I think it's time Zion goes to another team.
Only reason I agree that they should trade for a pick is because Zion never plays. He never plays. So what good is he for you? Also, when the Lakers traded for AD, the one thing I was screaming was do not let Ingram go in that trade, and they let Ingram go in that trade. That's the only guy I was like, you do not let Ingram go in that trade. Give him anything else.
Yeah, I think the real reason that they let him go at the end of the day was I know that I don't think it was Luke Walton that said this. He said that and this was not while he was coaching, this was after. He said that he thinks the real reason they let him go was because LeBron and him, they weren't clashing like in the locker room, but their play styles were clashing, and that LeBron and that other people within the team thought that Ingram's game would actually benefit from being in a different system. So I also think they had to throw him in to get that player, and I think that was probably a non-negotiable, but I also think that part was for his benefit as a player. So I'm with you on that, to think what if we, what could have been. That's a good thing to think about, and a really true thing to think about. But I do think that it's better for everybody that was a piece in the end. But what I will say is I do think it's time that the Pelicans move on. And I am with you that, okay, for the most part, history shows that a top draft pick will probably formulate at least for a couple of good seasons, or at least it'll become a good trade target. A top draft pick is usually a good route. I think it could be good for the Pelicans, but if you don't get a player that's ready to win now and ready to be a big impact now, that's when it can be a problem. If it's a player that has to develop, like Alonzo Ball, he was so hyped up, and I was hyped. I bought a jersey. I was listening to his terrible, absolutely awful rap music. I was like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. I was buying into the Lonzo Ball hype, and then not what was, and again, great player in his own right, one of the better defensive guards, but was not who we thought it was going to be. And
well, his dad convinced you all that he was better than he was.
That's part of it. Yeah, it was the social media. It was all that. It was he did convince us all, and that was part of the problem. Had he not been talking like that, maybe the expectations wouldn't have been the same, because that was definitely not what he was talking about. But no, I think it can work out. History shows that it does work out. History also shows the other side of that. But I do think it could be a good move for them to trade up and try to get a top pick. A team I want to talk about is my Lakers. When we talk about my Lakers, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that the Lakers need to try to hold on to players like Reeves and Hachimura and really focus on keeping them, or should they look for some top end pieces and should they focus on that? What should the Lakers do?
You have LeBron. You're trying to win a championship right now. This isn't. I think you go all in at CP3, or you go all in at Kyrie. You do whatever it takes to get that next guy to help you get over that hump, to get another ring. And then probably when it's all said and done, if you get that other ring, you're back to where you were, trying to rebuild that team with Brandon Ingrams and Balls and of the world, that type of thing. But if you have a chance at another championship, especially if you're a team like the Lakers, just sell out and go get it. And I think CP3 is the perfect guy to go after. I think it's better than Kyrie, just because CP3 wants a ring more than anything too. So it's going to be all basketball all the time with that guy.
That is a good point. It will be all basketball. The reason that I think it's a bit of a gamble is his health, and I think that he's kind of past that point where he can make it through and push through, because
Isn't he a free agent though? So you're not. I mean, maybe you get him to come in for less than extreme.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was. Well, yeah, I think that here's my biggest thing. If there's a guard that I think is realistic that would help us win a title, Yes, it could be CP3 if he stays healthy. Yes, it could be Kyrie if his head stays on the right way. But I think Fred VanVleet, why not just go for a player like that? That is a really, that's a player. Or a Brunson. I think a Brunson would be a great player. Go for one of these players. I think that you go for one of those players, a realistic option. And CP3 is also a realistic option. We're not going to pay CP3. CP3 is not going to get overpaid by the Lakers. So if we're talking about more realistic, guards that we could pay and not, break the bank and give too much up on, CP3 is one. Brunson's probably one. And I'm also thinking, honestly, no, James Harden, I wouldn't want, not going to happen. Kyrie Irving, I do think that's possible. I don't know if I want that. But, Fred VanVleet and Brunson are the two in my mind that are like, those make sense. And then I also think we need to try to keep Austin Reeves. We need to try to keep Hachimura. Those are two players that made an impact. That is a reason that we stayed afloat in the playoffs until we didn't, was because of those two players. So you've got to go for those guys. And honestly, at this point, it is time to understand that the LeBron days are coming to an end. I think people understand that. I think the team will understand that, and they'll try to go for one last push with him. But this is the end of the LeBron era. If they don't win this year, I think he's done. If they win this next year, maybe he tries to run it back again. But if you have one season guaranteed, it is time to stop messing around and try to win that chip. And it's not going to happen if we only make a push February on like this season. If we had this team the whole season last year, I do think that we'd be right up there with the Nuggets and we'd have depth. And I think we would have been a different team. So that's, neither here or there, but I do think the Lakers need to really prioritize keeping Hachimura and Reeves and going for a realistic, dangerous option like a VanVleet or a Brunson or maybe a CP3.
Well, if you want a Chris Middleton, give the Bucks a call.
Oh, I'm good on that. I'm good. I think I'm good.
Look at me just trying to pawn off a $40 million contract on you. Like, here.
Well, speaking of the Bucks, let's talk about them. What do your Bucks need to do, man? What do you think they need to do going forward?
The same thing they've needed since Giannis got there, a point guard.
So out of all the guards that are available or potentially available, who do you think would be the best fit for that Bucks team and for Giannis?
This is what I think you do, but I don't know if you can make it work. You back the Brinks truck up to Kyrie and go, come run this team from the point for us. And I think him and Giannis would be fine together. I think that Kyrie would be great. I think you and I talked about this before. People are like, he causes problems. And I was like, I think the media makes a lot of that blown out of proportion. And no players get in trouble in Milwaukee. I've said this before because there's nothing to fucking do in Milwaukee.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you're right. I think that'd be a good fit for everyone involved. I can really see Giannis and Kyrie's play style working and fitting well together. So I think that would be a good move. Like you said, they need to give him a guard. Lots of those teams with those big ones, Murray. Jokic has Murray. You need to match that up. You have to have that balance. When you have a good point guard, center, or big man, even if it's power forward, when you have that balance, that goes a long way. So I think I'm with you on that. They need to prioritize a guard.
Chris Paul, I'd be good with. I like everybody you just named for the Lakers. I would be good with if they came our way too. You know what I mean? Like I think that their biggest problem is that they just haven't had that dog at point guard.
I'm with you. There's a lot of sneakily this free agency and this offseason has quite a few big name point guards. Point guards is a really common trend, and we're going to see a lot of big name point guards go places. A team that I want to talk about, it's kind of random to talk about, but we're going to talk about them we're going to talk about the Houston Rockets. Obviously, we already know they need to do a rebuild. They need to build up, but do the Rockets go for James Harden? Would getting a James Harden type of player make a difference? There's also a talk of Zion Williamson being a trade target. Let's say that the Rockets somehow get Zion and they get James Harden. Is that a good mix? Would that work? Could they be a successful team? What do they need to do?
Do you like just with James Harden? That's like that retread. Let's do this again. Weird shit. But I didn't even think of Zion until you just said it. And my thing with Zion is, if you're Houston, absolutely go after it, because if he pans out, you got a great player. If he doesn't, you're still putting asses in the seats for a bad team.
Fair enough. That's a good point. I will say that is I will say this. I think the James Harden experiment could work. I think it really could work. I think, especially if James Harden is matched up with enough young guys that can shoot and play defense, I do think that it could work. Now, you're going to have to look at that Houston team and you're going to have to rebuild pretty much from the ground up. That Houston team does not really have that much to go off of, but something that I do think would give them that boost would be getting James Harden. I think that getting a player back to the city of Houston like James Harden would be exactly what they need to start that rebuild. So I think that James Harden to Houston makes sense. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm kind of excited if it does because honestly, I'm not a Houston fan, never been, never probably going to be, but I do have really good memories of seeing James Harden play for Houston, some pretty fun games. So it'd be fun to see him back. And I think starting from there, getting James Harden, securing that, it could be something that could really get this team built. And is James Harden going to win a championship in Houston? Absolutely not. It's not going to turn into a championship, but I do think it could turn into something maybe. I do think that that could turn into at least making their way back to the playoffs. So I think start with James Harden and go from there. They've got that draft pick. They've got, obviously it just if they got Zion, it would be that draft. That's what it would be. That would be a trade for that pick. So would I would keep the pick and I would try to get Harden. I would not trade for Zion. If I'm the Rockets, I'm not trading for Zion. It's not reliable enough. Like you said, even if you're a bad team, going to put people in the seats, but I'm not doing that because I think the Rockets are a team that wants to be successful again. So I think they're going to keep their draft pick, try to get Harden and try to put some pieces around Harden and start that rebuild from there.
Do you think there's a chance any team could go and trade for John Morant? Do you think?
That's a great question, man. Well, so here's what I will say. I don't know because I think it's going to depend on what his sentence is because apparently the NBA thinks they need to sentence him to something and give him some big. I'm going to be honest at this point, I think it's a little ridiculous. I think it's getting to the point where they're saying it's on a Gilbert Arenas level and it's not. It's not something like that. It's not something where it's being
Gilbert threatened a fucking teammate in the locker room with guns.
It's a way different thing. It's not even close, but it's being like talked about and hyped up so that you would almost think it is the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, if you didn't know what happened, it's like, what did this guy do? Why is he potentially going to be out half the season? Ridiculous. Do I think someone's going to trade for him? No, I do not. I think that the Memphis Grizzlies are committed to him, and I think he is committed to them. I don't think that's going to switch. Okay. I think that the Grizzlies are a team. Speaking of if we're talking Grizzlies, just going through, I think the Grizzlies are a team that just needs to build up. I don't think they need to rebuild. Keep Ja. See if you can add some. I think what they need is they need to add some vets. They need to get some vets in that locker room.
That's what Kendrick Perkins was saying. You wouldn't have the dumb shit going on with Ja,
and
you wouldn't have the dumb shit with Dylan Brooks, right?
Yeah. No, get some vets because vets are not going to put up. Even vets nowadays, maybe it's not the same vets we used to see, the same like vibe, but it is still the same thing. Get some vets in, get their act together, and they're going to be a dangerous team because they were a dangerous team even though they were a media circus and they were all over the place. Get some vets in. The Memphis Grizzlies need to focus on getting some vets in there and building that team up. An interesting team I want to talk about because we're kind of going through some of the lower end teams. What do you think the Thunder need to do? Because the Thunder are a team that have draft picks for days. Do they hold on to these? Let's go beyond just this next season since they have all those. They have draft picks for kids that are still in middle school. They have draft picks for kids that haven't even played their first high school basketball game yet.
This is the only league where you hear they're trading for a 2028 pick.
Oh my God. No, yeah, you don't hear that. So with hearing that though, do the Oklahoma City Thunder, they've got Gilgeous-Alexander, do they build a team around him, maybe trade some of their draft picks, try to trade for some pieces to build around him, or do they rely on the whole trust the process, build from the draft, and whatever else we can get? What do you think that Oklahoma City Thunder team does going into next season?
Besides Oklahoma City, using draft picks to build a team has never worked really in the NBA, except they came very close with Harden, Durant, Westbrook. You think you can hit that fucking like kind of magic in a bottle again? Because I don't. And this isn't a league. Like if they were in the NFL, I'd be like, stock those picks. Stock those picks if you're in the NFL. But I don't see that working in the NBA because what? A handful to a dozen guys maybe turn out to be starters in a draft.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think, yeah, you can't win off of just draft picks alone. It's more than that, and that's what the Thunder are known for, and that's what they've been known for. Even back looking at the days with James Harden, Kevin Durant, they couldn't get it done then. They're not going to get it done now. They got really close, but they got really, really. You're not going to catch lightning in a bottle twice like that. So I think it's time you look at your star player because yes, Oklahoma City does have a star player. And it's not a Chris Paul one weird random NBA season. It's an actual player that's built there and that's been growing there. You have a star, and so you need to go from there. Look at Shea. I think Gilgeous-Alexander is the only player that's untouchable. Every other player on that roster, look at who can we get for them? What can we get? Build a team around Alex. It's going to take more than just this season, but I want to see them start to reconstruct their lineup.
You're right. If you can bring in a couple free agents that help that team build around him and you draft wisely with those picks, you might have something.
Yeah, you got to. There has to be a balance. They've got to maybe throw some picks in trades. They've got to throw some players in trades. Hold on to some. Build. That's a balanced build. Build balancedly. Don't try to go. You got to build with a balance. You cannot go. I'm gonna go stack all my chips in this basket. I'm gonna stack all of them for drafts. You've got to find that balance. So you've got to build it up like that. And I do think they will keep Alexander. Everyone else, other than him, other than Shai, everyone else is on the table. Keep some picks, build up like that, build up the right way. Another team just keeping the flow going, an interesting team to talk about is the Phoenix Suns. What do the Phoenix Suns do? Obviously, they waived Chris Paul. There's a chance they could still sign him. There's talks that they'll try to restructure a contract and sign him. But what do the Suns do? Because they've got KD and they've got Vogel now. What do the Suns do going forward?
Do you try to repeat that Brooklyn fucking Kyrie and KD thing? I wonder about that.
That's yeah.
They got to have a plan though, because it looks like that Chris Paul's not going to be there. So they have to have a plan. And you got two really good stars to build around.
They're looking for that guard. Just like a lot of these teams, a common theme, we're not probably going to get to talking about every single team, but a common theme for even the teams we don't talk about is looking for that guard. A lot of these teams, especially because we just saw a team with an amazing guard like Murray win, a lot of these teams want to juice that guard position up. So I think Phoenix, I think they're going to do it. I don't know if I'd call it a mistake, but I might call it a mistake. I think they're going to make that Kyrie KD connection again because Kyrie and KD, as much drama and constant stuff that has been with them, after KD left, after Kyrie left, there was a live stream of them together since they had left where they both said on live that they wanted to play again together and that they plan to play it. This is probably the only opportunity for them to play again. And it matches up really well. And when I saw Chris Paul was waived, my mind instantly went to they're going for Kyrie. That's what I instantly thought because they've got Ayton for a little bit longer at least. They've got Booker, they've got KD. All they need is that point guard, and then they're back in. So I think they're going to prioritize that, and I think they're going to pull the trigger. I think Kyrie is going to be a Sun.
What do you think happens with the Clippers, though? Because here's an interesting stat. Did you know that Kawhi Leonard has more finals MVPs than he does triple doubles in his career?
I saw that today on Instagram. I saw a post about that. And it's interesting. I will say this. I think if I'm the Clippers, it's not time to restart. It's not time to completely rebuild, but I think it is time to look past certain players. And even if you give that Paul George Kawhi connection one more try, I think this is the last season that you really put all your chips on that. I think it's time to look forward to maybe a future. Now, something I think, we're talking CP3, and I want to make it clear, I would much rather have him as a Laker just because he was already supposed to be a Laker. If he went back to being a Clipper, it would be kind of like, okay, whatever. But I do think that if he doesn't become a Laker, the next team that's going to go for him is the Clipper. I think Chris Paul is either going to become a Clipper or a Laker when it's all said and done. Chris Paul is going to LA. I don't care which team it is. I do think Chris Paul is going to LA. I do think, and I'm right now sitting here saying I think it's going to be a Clipper. I think we'll see several reunions I think James Harden goes back to Houston, Chris Paul goes back and becomes a Clipper. And I do think that gives the team a boost if they all stay healthy. But Kawhi, injury prone. Paul George, injury prone. CP3, getting old and starting to become more injury prone. That could either be the best thing or it could be a nightmare. So, and then we have to talk about Russell Westbrook because that's another. I mean, that's a player that I think the Clippers were maybe going to hold on to. But if you're going to try to get CP3, do you keep Russell Westbrook? I don't think so. I don't think you prioritize keeping Westbrook. I don't think you prioritize keeping Westbrook, period. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think the experiment's been proven to be a failure. I think you're done. I think you have zero shot at winning a championship with that team as it is. And Kawhi Leonard rubbed me the wrong way when he held the whole NBA up when he already knew he was going to the Clippers. He knew what he was doing. He just did this whole look at me thing for a while. And then
on that,
there's these fucking rest days. He takes more rest days than any other player in the NBA.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, man. I'm not. I mean, trust me. If there's someone that's not afraid to not love the Clippers, it's me. So I'm with you on that. But I think that they could be that team still. I don't think they'll win a chip. I don't think that experiment with Paul George and Kawhi is going to end in a chip. But I do think it could end in them maybe a little more success and staying together a little bit longer. But they've got to get that guard. Another team that I want to talk about that's kind of interesting. I want to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves because Karl Anthony Towns, Cat, just came out and said, when you talk about players that change the game, I'm one of them. I don't think that that's really true in my personal opinion. But with him coming out and saying something like that and them having really not great success, they tried Rudy Gobert. It didn't really beef that team up like they thought it would.
4 first-round picks.
Yeah, gone. What do they do going forward? What does this Minnesota? Do they need to already look into moving pieces around and rebuilding?
I think they got to sell out and try to win, even though I don't think they can because you gave up 4 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert. Like, what the fuck else do you have? Like, you got to get into free agency and try to like build that team up to a championship team. I just don't think that they have the talent. Like, on paper, they shouldn't be the way they are. Like, that's the problem. Like, and there's no dog in the building.
No, not at all. Ant is kind of a dog, but not really. Anthony Edwards is not. He's not enough of one consistently. Rudy Gobert is definitely not one, and Cat is absolutely not one. So I think that they can't, because of what they did to get Rudy Gobert and to get the team they have now, they can't do anything that big. I think that they just have to try to beef their team up a little bit and build up. You have to try to build your guard position up. You've got to get shooters in. I think that Minnesota is really, really, really going to be hurting to get some shooters. You've got to get players that can shoot the ball.
I don't know what kind of cap room they have, but they need to overpay for mid-level players just to get better.
Agreed. No, because that's all they can really do is overpay for those mid-level, because those top players you're not going to see a top player go to Minnesota. It's not a big market. And even if it was a bigger market, because of how it looked last season, no player wants to go there at this point. So that's another interesting, because they just got a new coach and because we don't know exactly what this team is going to look like next season, what do the 76ers do? Because James Harden is most likely moving on. They're going to obviously have Embiid. What do the 76ers do? Do they rebuild or do they just build up?
Nobody wants to hear this, blow that shit up and start over. That trust the process shit didn't work when you drafted 4 big men in a row or whatever it was. It still hasn't got you a championship. And everybody can go, they've been close. Close does nothing for you in pro sports.
Close doesn't get you a banner or a parade.
Yeah, I think you blow it up. I think you start selling off pieces and try to see what you can do to start over again.
I'm with you on 76ers, another controversial take.
Or how about you never let Jimmy Butler out of that fucking building? But that's not.
Well, yeah, I bet hindsight, I bet they wish they never did. But another team that I think needs to blow it up that might be looked at as a controversial pick. I don't think the Celtics need to blow it up, but it's time to look at what can you do to win because it's not worked. You've lost in the finals. You've lost in the conference finals multiple times. And like we just said, It's great. Yeah, they've won the conference finals. They've not won a championship with this team. I think it is time to look at what they can do going forward to build this team up. And that might not include keeping Brown.
See, okay, I was gonna say you keep Tatum, you keep Brown, and then you go from there. My advice is Al Horford does just enough every year. I think he's got almost 40 if he's not. Like he does just enough every year for you not to walk away from him. You pay him too much to be there. You gotta walk away from him. You just got to.
Yeah, it's time to look for pieces that are actually going to get it done. I don't now again, I said maybe Brown because I do think there's a universe where they can keep those core, they can keep a Jaylen Brown and a Jason Tatum, they can keep that duo. But I think if to get that piece that's going to get them over the hump, maybe they look at moving Jaylen Brown. But regardless, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum is the only player on that team that I look at as untouchable. Every other player at least can be looked at as maybe certain positions and certain things because I think the Celtics have been right there too many times to say next year. They've said that too many times. I'm not complaining. I don't want them to win number 18. I just keep them at 17 forever. But I know that they can be a better team if they look at building up and maybe doing something different. So I think
got a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does Brooklyn do to recover from the shit show that happened with KD and Kyrie and fucking Simmons? Like, what do they do to recover from that shit show?
I mean, it is a tough one. It is that is a team that unfortunately is going to have to rebuild, and they don't really have the draft picks in the near future to do that rebuild successfully. So it's going to have to be on those free agents. It's going to have to be on those teams that are bouncing in and around the league. You're going to see some of those track star players that run all around the league and don't do much on the court. You're going to see some of those players probably end up in Brooklyn to fill that lineup up. I think we're going to see not a steep drop off in Brooklyn. I think they could still be a 30-win team, but I don't think we're going to see them.
Yeah, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, because they've got play right now. Right now, the team that they have made the playoffs. They made the playoffs. I mean, they're not a bad team. Brooklyn is not a bad team, but they're not going to keep all those players going forward in the near and far future. And we saw that didn't work. They didn't have the big men to get it done. They were a small team. They were an exciting, pretty decently quick team, but I don't think they're going to be that. So I think they'll stay around where they are, but I think that they need to start rebuilding. They need to get that rebuild going. They need to look for pieces. And unfortunately, that's not going to come in the draft. That's going to come within the league.
You can't have a basketball rebuild show, or what should they do? So I know we're pushing an hour, but I got one more that I feel like we got to bring up. What do you think the Knicks should do? Because I think that's actually an exciting team to watch.
Well, I think it is too, but the interesting thing is Brunson wants out of that team. Brunson is a player. Now, could Brunson he stay? Could
you flip him for something that helps you out?
Or could flip him for something even better? That's the thing. I think that this Knicks team, honestly, I think this Knicks team does flip it. I think you flip Brunson and you see what you can get and you build up from there. Because yes, Brunson was a big part of this team, but you look at this team besides Brunson, and yeah, Brunson was great, but the team was great because of pieces besides just him. So I think you can flip him for something better, and I think you can build up from there. It's not time for this Knicks team to rebuild. It's time for them to build up. I know we don't have time to go into it too much, but another team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's not time for them to rebuild. It's time for them to build up. The Sacramento Kings, it's time for them to build up. A lot of these teams that made the playoffs had that success, but they just have to build up.
They got to figure out how to get better.
And they've got to take a look back and see what they can do to get even better. But there's a lot of teams that are like the Cleveland Cavaliers that used to be looked at as a rebuild team, the Sacramento Kings, even the Indiana Pacers. I don't think the Pacers are a rebuild team. They're a build-up team. There are so many teams that are better and that are build-up teams, and that's exciting to see as an NBA fan.
Yeah, and I think that there's not that big of a gap between some of those East teams and the Celtics and the 76ers as people think, because
absolutely.
I think we've watched the 76ers and the Celtics have a lot of hype behind them and not cash it in. You know what I mean? So they're not that far away from those teams as some people think.
Agreed.
All right, Montana, that was a fun show. I enjoyed doing that one. Why don't you let everybody know what else you got going on besides Well Beyond the Arc?
Absolutely. So I've got a couple other things going on. I have a Lakers show called Purple and Gold Zone. You can find it on Spotify and YouTube at Purple and Gold Zone. Doing a new episode sometime this week, so be on the lookout. Probably will be out around this weekend or maybe on Friday. And then another show, the Connor and Heffernan Show, all things sports. We talk MMA, NFL, college basketball, college baseball, and NHL, MLB. We talk everything. We talk all sports throughout that show. We just released a new episode last weekend. Check it out at the Connor and Heffernan Show, as well as on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube and Spotify. And then look out. I'm going to start making YouTube videos that are not podcasts. My first one is going to be the top starting five for every single NBA team of all time. So which starting five was the best for every single NBA team? Look for that within the next 2 weeks. That will be on my Connor and Heffernan Show YouTube.
Also, I can't wait for your next episode because I want to hear what you got to say about Stoner and the fucking boys down in Vegas with that ass whooping of a fucking series clinching game. That was an ass whipping.
It was. It was. It for sure was, man.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe. And please go over to Rumble. If you got Rumble, follow us on Rumble. If you don't have Rumble, you might want to go download it because the UFC and Dana White with Power Slap and a bunch of stick have exclusive content over there too. So you might want to be on both Rumble and YouTube. And while you're there, hit that follow button. Well, everybody, we appreciate you watching. You guys all have a great. We have nothing but baseball left this summer season, and we'll see you soon. All right, one world, one love. Deuces.